who is the navigator leading us to the various realms of suffering, the power of karma and afflictions that bring us into the lower realms. Okay, so that verse is talking about the beginning part of the 12 links of dependent arising. You know, that the 12 links describe how we enter into samsara and also how we can get out of it. Okay, so the first link is ignorance, and here specifically, you know, and from the Prasangika viewpoint, it's the ignorance that holds both persons and phenomena to have their own essence, to exist from their own side, to be inherently self-enclosed things, you know. And that's the way we see things. They're objective, out there, you know, they don't depend on being conceived and labeled, they don't depend on parts, they don't depend on causes, they're just there, okay? And so based on this, then we generate a lot of afflictions, you know, primarily confusion, attachment, and anger, and so those are called the three poisons. So based on, especially on reifying this sense of ourself, you know, then we want to protect ourselves at all costs, bring every happiness to ourselves, get rid of any possible suffering. Okay, so we develop attachment for the things and people and situations and words and whatever that we think benefits us, and attachment to the happiness that they give us. We develop aversion to pain and to the people, things, situations, and so forth that we think threaten us. And then we remain confused or bewildered or ignorant about karma and its effects. So we don't really know how to create the causes of happiness and abandon the causes of suffering. Yeah, and so then, motivated by these three, we do lots of actions, which is simply what karma means. Karma just means actions of our body, of our speech, of our mind. These actions leave seeds or jigpas, having ceased, and then when the cooperative conditions come together, then these seeds or these having ceased ripen, and they influence what realm we're born into, you know. So if we have wondered sometimes, why was I born me, you know, in the situation that I'm born in, this is it, you know, because of our own previous afflictive emotions, our ignorance, the karma we created. Yeah. Why do we sometimes encounter situations where we lack what we need? You know, whether it is physical things or friendship or whatever. That's often because we were attached before and did a lot of harmful actions out of attachment to get what we wanted. You know, why do we experience situations that we don't like, that we find difficult? Very often because we had anger in the past and were hostile towards others. Of course, sometimes the anger can produce the situations in which we lack something we need, and the attachment can produce situations in which we encounter what we don't like. So I'm not giving a definitive thing here, okay? But to realize that, you know, especially when we encounter obstacles or things that we think are not fair, or you know, criticism or anything like this, to realize it's the product of our own afflictive emotions. And similarly, when we encounter good qualities or good experiences in our life and many opportunities, instead of taking them for granted and becoming complacent, to recognize that although these were motivated by ignorance, we, you know, on the bottom level, we still managed to have some kind of virtuous attitude. And so we were generous, or we had good ethical conduct, or, you know, we practiced fortitude or whatever, generated love and compassion. And so because of that, then we experience good things in our life. So, you know, there's never any reason or purpose in blaming anybody else for what we experience, or for praising ourselves for what we get, because it's all dependent on, you know, previous actions. Of course, you know, creating the circumstances in which either destructive or constructive karma can ripen, that's, you know, we play a role in this life. Yeah, because if our mind gets very negative and our actions get negative this life, it becomes very easy for negative karma created in the past to ripen. Okay? When we have a positive attitude, it becomes easier for virtue to ripen. Now, sometimes negative karma will still ripen when we're practicing the Dharma, but then we try and see it as purification, you know, of something that could have ripened in a situation that would have been a lot heavier and more unpleasant. Okay? So to be aware of, you know, ignorance and afflictions and karma and how they shape our experience. And when we are, then we get a certain kind of power, because we have the, you know, the knowledge, and hopefully we'll develop the wisdom to then create the kind of circumstances that we desire, instead of simply acting out any old thought that enters our mind, which can be really dangerous. Yeah, so my generation's thing of be spontaneous is not such good advice. Yeah? When we have virtuous minds, yes, be spontaneous. When we have non-virtuous minds, do not be spontaneous. Practice restraint. Okay? That, you know, you're saying the awareness of death makes things more urgent. And I know every evening I always check my alarm clock that it's going to go off the next morning. And it's like, oh, one more day is over. Yeah? One more day. And just to see how quickly things go, and that, you know, we ourselves are going towards our own death. And there's no way to stop it. Yeah? And so then the question is, how do we live a really vivid, rich life that has meaning and purpose? Yeah, and not waste our time protecting our ego. Very definitely. Because the poor me, you know, you're saying that thinking about karma helps you to accept responsibility for creating the causes for what you encounter. And so in that way it pulls you out of the victim mentality. Yeah. And the victim mentality is quite a hole. You know, we get stuck in that, and boy, we can't move. Yeah? Because we give our power away. If my unhappiness is due to what other people did to me, then I'm powerless. There's nothing I can do. Yeah? And that's a horrible mental state. Plus being an untrue, false mental state. Okay, so you're saying for when we see ourselves as victims, one thing is to do volunteer work and help others and pull ourselves out of ourselves. And another one is to be around people who have an understanding of karma, because they're not going to buy into our self-pity story. Yeah? Because our friends who buy into our self-pity story actually aren't necessarily the people who help us the most. Yeah? It's the people who challenge us. Yeah? Who say, you can do something different. Yeah? Don't blame the world. We don't like that. We want a little bit of self-pity. Yeah. But you know, self-pity is really a pit, isn't it? A pity pit.